Well, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I really want to thank everyone who's joining in person as well as taking the time to join on the line. For those of you who don't know me, my name is April A.G. Carroll. I am the 2018 chair of the North American Plant Phenotyping Network. And today we are going to go through some of our annual business for the convening of the General Assembly. So the agenda for today, we're going to introduce, I'm sorry. Yes, let me go back. Yes, I was reminded. So we are recording this session right now. So any audio or video will be recorded and displayed. We have a presentation link here to a Google Drive that is also on the NAPPN website. So if anybody on the line needs that link, I know it's a lot to type in. We are also keeping notes in this folder as we've done for all of our events to date. So there's a Google document in there that we really encourage people to contribute to that Google document. So please, if you don't have time to type this link in, you can then go to our website and look on the General Assembly. So if I've tap danced for long enough for those who are typing it in, then let's get going. So I'm going to start with an introduction of our outgoing 2018 Executive Board. We're going to go through our minutes from last year, our General Assembly, which was held here at Phenome. And then we'll do a retrospective of some really big accomplishments that we're so proud to share for 2018 and 2019. So David Ergel is going to talk through this recent survey of our membership, which has yielded actually some really interesting results. All of that will be publicly available on our website, the raw data, as well as kind of our summaries and interpretations of some of that data. So our 2019 chair, Carolyn Lawrence Dill, is going to introduce our incoming 2019 and 2020 executive boards, and then give us a look ahead to some of the things that we have going on. We're also going to call for some volunteers to lead what we're calling affinity groups. So everyone, hopefully you can think of some good topics that you want to lead discussions with. Can be a minor commitment, but we'd like to get some engagement from the community. We have some just minor amendments to the bylaws that will be circulating probably online, and then if there's time at the end, then we'll have breakout discussions. So here is a summary of our kind of our mission and vision statement. Being that we are an association of scientists and we're formed as a regional partner of the International Plant Phenotyping Network. So our home has been at a few different locations. We've held our General Assembly meetings here at Phenome, as well as having our first General Assembly meeting at Purdue a few years back, which I see a lot of familiar faces who have been with us since that very first meeting. So thank you all for continuing to engage with us. So our vision as an organization is to make phenomics a turnkey product. So something like microscopy, where every biological scientist is trained to evaluate phenotypes using the latest technologies, but still keeping phenomics as its own discipline, as its own area of scholarship, similar again to microscopy or genomics, that there are scientists who specialize in that cutting, bleeding edge to really try to develop new techniques and technologies, as well as the folks like myself who are consumers of the technologies that want to make it more accessible to everyone. So we're looking to achieve this vision. I won't read through all of these points, but we're trying to expand our membership and really become more visible, especially across different disciplines. So we want to be a synergistic organization that helps collaborators to find each other, helps those engineers to meet the biologists that have these really exciting problems, and then find the data scientist who's up and coming that has some really great new methods for spatial recognition or patterns. So we want to do this in such a way that the complementary disciplines can come together, and Carolyn will talk more about that, but also the public and the private sector. So we deliberately have representation on our board from both the public and the private sector, and we have quota numbers of certain board seats are related to certain disciplines. So this also includes data standards and ways to facilitate data sharing, and also to facilitate better training for the next generation of scientists who are not going to just specialize in one of these areas, but who are going to have to know all of them to really be successful in their respective discipline. So with our values, I think you know, knowing so many of you here, I think we all have really some shared values around diversity, around interaction, and just really expanding the breadth and the depth of this technology to make it accessible for really the good of science and agriculture and every discipline that we serve. Okay, so we are a regional partner of the International Plant Phenotyping Network. So we actually have 2 co-chairs of the IPPN here in the room. Xavier, are you still? Yeah, so Xavier here is representing the IPPN as one of the co-chairs, Jennifer Clark here also. So it's really great to have been able to spin off of such an already successful organization. One of the kind of initial vision for the organization was that, hey, the IPPN is great, but where's the Americas? How are we, you know, really maximizing synergies if we're not networking across overseas? So with that, we have kind of a long history. There are some, there's a new publication that we'll talk about as one of our milestones that talks through that history. I'm not going to go through that specifically today, but I will go through a little bit here historically, just to talk through, first to thank our inaugural ad hoc board, of which many folks in the room right now served on that board, really helped us to gather input from hundreds of scientists around the world to find, you know, first of all, do you guys see a need for this? And the answer was resoundingly yes. And then once we decided that we needed something, well, okay, then what's it going to be? What's it going to look like? And that was where really the work started to begin. And so we drafted bylaws, we got input at a number of convening events. A lot of people found sponsorship to be able to host these convenings. And so it was really a labor of love. I see Arhelia is here, Jennifer, Carolyn, Noah, Malia, and one more. Oh, me, yeah. Yeah, right. So anyway, so that was the ad hoc board. I just want to thank those folks who really got us off the ground and got things moving for us in the right direction. So the first task of the ad hoc board was to elect a new official board that was elected by the membership. And so again, we'll talk about kind of how that election procedures have gone, but I was really just totally honored to be elected as the inaugural chair for the 2018 executive board by the board of our peers. So the board elects the chair and the co-chair. Carolyn was elected as the co-chair, and we also did rotating terms so that folks, we could stagger the terms of people coming into the organization. We'll talk about that later as well. So Seth, I want to thank you very sincerely for your service on the board. But Seth and I are now at the end of our terms, and maybe like the President Obama mic drop, or maybe not quite so dramatic, but really Seth and I both really are very happy to have served on this group, and we will totally be around, so you can't get rid of us. We are still in for the long term. So we also have David Erbel, who joined from Iowa Corn. We have Jen Jin. They're from Purdue University, representing our engineering disciplines in the public sector. David's representing one of our industry seats along with myself. Carolyn Lawrence Dill representing computational disciplines from the public sector. Charlie Messina, another industry seat there. Seth Murray there, Texas A&M, and you're biology in this right? But everyone, you know, it's kind of neat how everyone blends together. And then Chris Top, also from the Danforth Center, front here is another public sector biologist. So really pleased everyone's here. And Charlie had a last minute conflict that couldn't get through. So, but we've had just wonderful engagement from all the boards. So thank you all for a wonderful year. Okay, so last year we had a number of folks contribute to the convening of the General Assembly. This is just a recap of the meeting minutes. Arhelia gave a history of the NAPPN, which when we looked at it even a year ago, it's like, oh my gosh, we've really done a lot, and it's really adding on to that with each passing year. Carolyn led a discussion about our bylaws. So the bylaws document that the ad hoc board had drafted there was a motion that carried carried to accept the bylaws as they were drafted. One of the changes to the bylaws that we are proposing for this year that will go out in more of an online format for voting and discussion with the new board is about some amendments to those bylaws, one of which is making it a little easier to amend the bylaws. So right now we have to have a vote of the General Assembly, and I don't know about you guys, but I always find 10 more typos every time I read anything. So so that's one of the things that we're going to propose this year, that the board has a little bit more leeway, especially just to make minor adjustments, not to the content so much as just the say language or how that goes. So we looked to the community to talk about future directions. There were some challenges that the membership presented in just the technical aspects of understanding phenotypes. We also looked towards potential pre-competitive areas as a thing that the NAPPN could really contribute to, both for enhancing collaborations and the public-private partnerships and access to more funding for groups that really want to kind of bring that new model together. And we also talked about what's the value of the NAPPN, how can we really bring this to bear as something more tangible. So the exploration of the possible funding sources, again, that was discussed last year. We have some really exciting updates to bring to you this year in 2019. And we had some great breakout discussions. So those notes were all kept on Google Docs. I was going through that in preparation for this, and it was just really amazing to see all the feedback and all the participation. So there were 4 topics here about proposals, data sharing, working groups, which we're now calling affinity groups, and partnerships. Okay, so with that, the milestones and accomplishments sections, I'm going to turn over to Carolyn.
So the first thing that I'll talk about is a publication. The group of us that was the ad hoc board that sort of assembled the NAPPN got together and just wrote a short paper on what NAPPN is, so that for any of you that you have a need to talk about what NAPPN is or refer to it, you have some small publication that describes what the organization is so that we can talk about it more easily in our research. So the Plant Phenome Journal will have that up very soon. One thing that you see in the top left there that I'm going to blow up is a flower. This is something that Seth put together initially, and it was our concept for what the NAPPN is and what we endeavor to do. So conceptually, what we think we do is not to replace any existing societies or organizations, but instead, because the scope of what plant phenomics is, it pulls from so many different disciplines. What we see ourselves as is making a representation to these various different areas as petals in this flower. And so what that means to us is that if we want to be able to engage like that, we also have to go to the meetings of the people that have those sorts of competencies and interests. And so we have begun doing that this year, going to multiple meetings. And that's something that Jen is going to describe for us next.
Thank you, Caroline. My name is Jen. So just want to very quickly update you about our members' activities and involvement in some of the other meetings. So here I have 3 meetings in my list, but I believe our members are not limited to just these activities. So the first one is our International Plant Phenotyping Symposium, IPPS. So this happened in October 2018 in Adelaide, in Australia. So this is the first meeting, and I believe 2 of our IPPN executive board members joined this meeting. So this is the first one. The second one is our plant and animal genome meeting. So just happened last month, January in 2019. So we had 2 workshops. One is plant phenotypes. Another one is genome to phenome, next generation sensors for sensing plants and environment. So really appreciate the organizers and the speakers in these 2 workshops. And another third meeting is 2018 ASABE meeting, American Society of Agriculture and Biological Engineers. So myself and Seth, we joined this meeting, and David made a very beautiful and nice postcard flyer, and we printed 500 copies. So we had a booth at the registration of ASABE meeting, and I think before I left, we had around almost 100 cards picked up by people. Seth also joined some other meeting later at the end of the meeting. So another upcoming meeting is again the IPPS 2019 meeting in Nanjing, China. So I believe again our executive boards will be there, and I know at least myself plans to be there. So look forward to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is something that you'll see a request. If you go to the NAPPN website, we request that anyone that's going to one of their normal organizational meetings that wants to represent NAPPN on behalf of the membership, will help you in any way that we can. So please reach out. So I want to go back to this flower, not just because we like flowers, because, you know, plants, but also because we have a little bit of data. And very often, you come to a meeting and people talk about how they're going to plan. We don't just want to plan based on what it is that people think or feel. We also want to plan based on real hard numbers, data, because we're scientists. And why should anything we do like this be much different than what it is that we do for our jobs? So if we look at this flower and look at what the different disciplines are, and again, we look at what the kinds of conferences are where we imagine our membership is going to be. Because we conducted a survey this year, and we have access to registrations as well as attendance from at least a couple of those meetings, the two at the top, we were able to look at where our members go. So if you look at this part of our flower, if you look at the Phenome conference and the PAG conference as an example, and we assume that the other petals are similar, but this is the first one that we've looked at, it turns out those people who are here, those people that are here as members of NAPPN attend both Phenome and PAG. And if you look at the overlap between our NAPPN membership and the PAG conference, for example, through our survey, 10 people said they attend both conferences. The overlap with Phenome is also 10. The group that said they attend both of them is 22. Then if we look at registrants at those conferences that are also members of NAPPN, those numbers are also almost balanced. And the overlap there is 11 in this example. So we think that we can continue to look not only at results of our surveys, but also who it is that's registering at conferences. That's going to help us not only to figure out where NAPPN needs to be meeting because our membership is already there. It's going to help us to figure out where we don't have membership in areas that we really need to pull into this area. So if you think of a conference like IEEE, if we don't have somebody representing us at IEEE, and there are many computational biologists there who could get interested in this area, that's a place that perhaps we need to go. So the results from this is mainly intended just as data so that we can decide where are we already represented, where do we need representation, and how do we go about that strategically. So again, we assume that if we fill out the rest of that flower that we're going to see something that is informational to us and we can be strategic about our get-togethers. Are there any questions about that before I walk on? So I'm going to hand April, your name is on this slide. I'm going to hand it back over to April.
So one of the accomplishments this year was something that we really hadn't planned on addressing. We started off with a number of requests as kind of a new board that said, hey, we know you, you know me, I'm doing great work, I'm putting in a grant proposal. What do you say? Either you personally write a letter to support my grant proposal or however that might go, or even better, how about the NAPPN submits a letter of support for my proposal? So at first, you know, I'm at a personal level, of course, yeah, hey, let's get this letter out for you. But then we talked a little bit more as a board that we needed to kind of standardize our approach to supporting our membership in competitive grant processes, because right out the gate, we had two sets of really valuable colleagues that were applying for the same competitive grant that we totally supported, the efforts of both groups. So we had, as a board, we went around and around about this, and it's just one of those nuanced things that you really have to think through. Seems fairly straightforward. But what we did was we came up with some common language for letters of support that would hopefully support our membership, support our researchers, but not give any kind of a bias towards any individuals or any groups. So the common language that we decided on after, like I said, a lot of deliberation was that we describe our mission and our membership, and that we have a pledge to connect the awardees of whichever grant that may be with our membership of more than 500 members and partner organizations abroad. We extend an invitation to collaborate and an invitation to connect with collaborators, and also with sharing of outcomes. So outcomes of the grant, outcomes of other membership, helping really to disseminate data, new methods, and really get the word out about the good work that's being done. All of this is really consistent with our mission and our values. And, again, ethically trying not to show any preferential treatment to, friends and neighbors, because really in this community, we're pretty tight knit. I think we all know each other, and there is naturally going to be some of this overlap. So, this year we submitted a number of letters of recommendation, or of support, I'm sorry, not recommendation, with planning grants, several of those, some fact proposals, and the renewal of the Midwest Big Data Hub. And I anticipate that there will be more of those in coming years. So just wanted to get the word out there that was something that we accomplished, that was actually something that I'm pretty proud of that we put together this year, that we're able to help our membership. Okay.
Yes, we should. So one thing that was a big outcome of last year was a discussion about how on earth, as an organization, are we actually going to get anything done when we have $0? That's a problem. So right now we're working on drafting an NSF Research Coordination Network proposal. This is something where you can ask for up to $500,000 over 5 years. And that's something to support our membership by building the networks, coordinating pipelines and tools, retooling scientists so they learn new things, and developing STEM education pipelines. So the group of us that volunteered to put together the RCN proposal are David LaBauer, Arhelia Lawrence, and Sintu Sankaran. So if you are interested in more detail on what it is that we're putting in for that proposal and what it is that we're going to support, I'm happy to share with you an overview of that. In effect, what you will be able to do if this RCN does get funded is to be able to create convenings on your own and invite people, and we will have the money that will help you to support pulling people together for hackathons, to help you with money for something where if you're going to go on a sabbatical and you want some support to go on a sabbatical in a different area, you can put in for money for things like that. So there are a number of different opportunities that if this NSF RCN gets funded, which we hope it will, the NAPPN will have money both for organizational stuff like our website, and surveys and those kinds of things, but also primarily to support get-togethers among people in this organization. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Seth to talk about the Early Career Scientist Awards. So this is something that many of you probably saw on the front page. Seth?
Howdy. So this was really exciting. I hope everybody else felt the same way. So this was put forth as a way that we could do a couple different activities. First of all, I know early career awards are very beneficial to certainly the scientists that receive them, right? Especially for tenure and promotion decisions, for visibility to a larger community, and getting their science out there. But it's also valuable to the organization that distributes them, right? So I think we found the people who were judging these, that it really increased the cohesion and recognition of what's going on around the phenotyping community, especially among the younger or early career scientists that seem to really be driving some of these areas. We also hope that it'll result in some increased visibility. I think by demonstrating an award in this area, it means that people value this area. And so that might be useful for funding agencies, for others. We also discussed in the future, and I won't be there to make that decision, but expanding those awards. And there's good models of doing this from other organizations: graduate student awards, postdoc awards, career industry awards. That's for the next board to decide. So put together a rubric. And so for people who are thinking about applying for this award in future years, I think most of the committee who used the rubric found it fairly useful, and I didn't get any negative feedback on it. So so there's a couple different things that were evaluated. The nomination letter, the CV, and the letters of support are all sort of traditional. But then, you know, what were the contributions made to plant breeding in various areas? And so sort of spelling out some of those areas. It could be anywhere from plant science all the way to machine learning or remote sensing. How did people help increase the visibility of plant phenotyping? And I think a lot of the nominees did it in different ways. So peer-reviewed publications, presentations, or social media was clearly another. I think almost all the committees on Twitter and tweeting during this meeting as it's occurring. Some research between public and private sectors. From the get-go, the fact that we have 2 industry representatives on the very small board is a good indication that that is a valued is going on in NAPPN. Following or setting standards for data best management practices. A lot of the people on the committee are really big into FAIR, big into open data, right? So that would be something that would enhance the future of plant phenotyping. Leading in novel research, and then of course transdisciplinary engagement. So not just working in your little area, but actually trying to bring in other disciplines and develop new areas. So here's the big reveal of the finalists. So the committee had a very, very difficult time. There were 7 finalists. Alex Bukish, and please don't fault me if Bukish. Yeah, I know I'm gonna mispronounce the names here, but he is in plant biology at the University of Georgia. Dr. Malia Gihan, I should know most of these names, but I'll still butcher them. Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, and she's developed Plant CV and some of the computational methods, really integrating plant science with analysis. Dr. Jian Jin, who is on our executive board. He's in agriculture and biological engineering at Purdue. I'm definitely going to mispronounce Sankaran's name. Biological systems engineering at Washington State University. And she's really been leading some outstanding work integrating engineering with plant breeding and other areas. James Schnabel, agronomy and horticulture at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Ian Stavness, computer science at the University of Saskatchewan. So it was nice to learn about somebody who was working in machine learning, totally separate from some of the other areas and circles people were aware of. And last but not least, Dr. Larry York, who runs root phenomics at the Noble Research Institute. And if you look at those disciplines, I think that's what's really, really outstanding, is almost none of those people are in the same department, right? How do you evaluate them? And that's why that metric and that rubric was so valuable. So now without further ado, the winner this year was Dr. James Schnabel, who is an assistant professor in University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And how's our timing? Do I have time to read his, a little bit about Dr. Schnabel? Okay. Okay. Dr. Schnabel is an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He's a member of the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture. He's got a lot of titles. The Center for Plant Science Innovation and the Quantitative Life Science Initiative. He works closely with computer scientists, statisticians, engineers, and applied plant breeders. Research in his lab focuses on phenomics and genomics of maize, sorghum, and allied species. They've developed multiple tools for scoring biochemical and morphological traits from hyperspectral images. His lab demonstrated that error in trait measurement between high throughput trait measurements and ground truth measures is itself under genetic control. They recently released a new method for using high dimensional trait data to identify genes involved in regulating phenotypic variation in maize. They are also developing new approaches to map genotype to phenotype relationships, looking at how trait changes over the life cycle of a plant in the greenhouse and field. In the past 5 years, his research group has published a total of 41 peer-reviewed papers. Past 5 years. 41 peer-reviewed papers in the areas of high-throughput phenotyping, quantitative genetics, and genomics. He is part of the G2F consortium, coordinating field trials in Nebraska since 2015. He's been active in bridging the gap between academia and the private sector, 3 startup companies. Drylandetics is using new phenotyping and genotyping technologies to breed water use efficient crops, which have been neglected by traditional breeding. Ingenuous Ag is commercializing sensors that can quickly measure nitrogen levels in plant stocks in the field. He received his Bachelor's of Arts from Cornell in 2008, PhD Berkeley in 2012, and his research is currently supported by the National Science Foundation, the United States Department of Agriculture, the RPE, and the Nebraska Corn Growers Association. So without further ado, let's clap for James. And he's a very nice guy, and I put his Twitter handle on there because he's probably on Twitter, so please treat your congratulations to him now that we've announced this publicly. He will be here tomorrow, and so we will announce this at the other NAPPN, and maybe we'll have a certificate by then for him.
He says thank you.
Okay. Dr. Ertl.
Okay, another accomplishment we had this year was to initiate a survey, and hopefully most of you or all of you got it because it was sent to both our NAPPN membership list and all participants of this conference. So if you're not one of those 2, I don't know why you're here. Must be the free food. But so those of you who are involved in the maize community know the maize genetics community does a great survey every year or every other year. A lot of good information comes out of that. So that's kind of what we modeled this after. And being the first one, it's really about getting a feel for what our membership thinks this organization should be doing and the direction we should be taking. And so we had a wide range of questions in that, everything from demographics all the way through what directions should we take and how do we increase engagement and so forth. And I started out and I had a huge presentation and I cut it down, and then last week I cut it down some more, and about 10 minutes ago we cut it in half again. So we're just going to give you a teaser, and all the results will be posted on our website, the raw data as well as some summary graphics. And let's see if we can make this work. Okay, so as I said, it was sent to the entire NAPPN membership, over 500 people, 83 responded. It was sent to the membership or the registrants of Phenome 2019, 187 people. 47 of those completed it. Some of those overlapped, and we only sent it to everyone once, so they wouldn't fill it out twice if they so desired. But in their responses, if they attended both or members of both, then their results will show up in both categories. So here's a few examples of just some things that we thought were interesting. You know, part of the demographics was understanding who are you, what's your role in your institution. Obviously very heavily skewed toward professors and research scientists, very few students or technical staff. And I think that's an area we need to focus on, is how do we engage more than just the scientists in this organization. And what's your primary field? Not surprisingly, given that this kind of grew out of biology and agriculture, and Phenome is based on plants, that we have an awful lot of agriculturalists, plant breeders, plant biologists, and then it rapidly drops off from there. And thinking back to that flower diagram, that the ones on the lower end of this scale certainly need to be bumped up, and we need to figure out ways to engage a much broader set of disciplines. We asked the question, what species do you work with? And we got a wide range of responses. Obviously, some of the major crops are up on top. And then they decrease rapidly, but as you can see, quite a broad range of crops represented, both in NAPPN as well as the Phenome attendees. a little bit more diversity in the phenome group. And then here are the rest of the crops that were represented at least one time in the responses. So again, I was really impressed with, I think we had almost 60 different species represented between our two groups. So in that regard, we have a lot of diversity, a lot of representation, and we can't forget all of the different crops and species as we go forward, not just concentrate on the few that we always think about. And this kind of builds off of what Carolyn talked about. What conferences do you attend? And not surprisingly, Phenome and PAG were two of the top ones, again, because we're primarily biologists, geneticists, agriculturalists. And as Carolyn pointed out, among the NAPPN members, pretty evenly split between PAG and Phenome. With the Phenome attendees, obviously Phenome is an important meeting, but again, they also attended ASPB, PAG, and then a few others, the Tri-Societies, and so forth, and then rapidly dropping off again, indicating that we do need to increase our engagement with all these other disciplines in their meetings. And I'm not going to go into all the details here. Some of the other comments regarding this I'll present on Friday at our community session, but there's a lot of comments written in about how do we increase engagement with these other societies and other disciplines that we'll talk about. We asked a question about timing of this General Assembly meeting, and in the past 3 years we've had it here, and so not surprisingly people like to have it here. But again, we're asking the choir, and we're not getting input from a lot of people that are not attending these meetings as well. So, but the first priority, of course, is to get more engaged with these other meetings before we can move forward. Let's see. Then we asked about how should we include people in the membership of NAPPN. Initially, we took all the people who attended the convening event at Purdue and Phenome, at least the first year, if not the second year, and automatically made you members. And that's how we got up to where we are today. At this point, we thought we'd ask the question, is that how we should continue to do business? Or should we add people and then ask them to opt out? That wasn't as popular. It was more popular to ask people to opt in, and so I think that's probably the direction we're going. And that's a reminder to plug, if you're not a member of NAPPN, to please go to our website. You can join for free and sign up, and then you'll be included in all the notifications and news about what we're up to, and you can then participate. Speaking of getting information about the network, pretty diverse responses here, and that's always the issue. People communicate in many different ways and have preferences on how they get information. Getting a regular newsletter was the top vote getter, and this was one of those questions you can select all that apply. We have information out on the website, send out information as it becomes available, and then there's some other social media type ways of attaining information. I think our strategy will likely be use multiple avenues as much as we can handle to try to get it out in several different ways. Carolyn just mentioned trying to get some financial support for this organization. As you know, we're running on $0. We're asking and begging to get what funding we need to do some of our basic operations. And so we asked if people would be willing to pay a membership fee. And I was actually quite surprised by these results that people all didn't say, forget it, they're not acceptable. There's actually some willingness. Now that doesn't mean we're going to do it. We're going to try to avoid charging anything. The IPPN does charge a membership fee. That's one way to do it, but we're going to try to find other avenues of funding before we have to resort to this, just to try to keep it open and affordable to all members. And then, so these results definitely show that we have a gap in terms of some of our technical fields represented. And so we asked, one of the questions we just asked for open input on what technical fields should we include, and I was a little bit surprised to see someone write breeding and genetics. I think we're pretty well represented there. But as you can see here, some other ideas. I thought the end user representation was good. Make sure you have industry folks that are actually going to use this research and apply it is a good add. But then obviously, all these other disciplines we talk about, engineering, computer science, image analysis, math, data. We all talk about it a lot. We just need to figure out how to get more engagement from those fields. And these are just some additional inputs that we had: modeling, statistics, microbiome. We haven't talked much about that, but that's certainly an attribute to root phenotyping and plant phenotyping. And in terms of demographics, we got some responses there as well. More women, more students. I thought that was kind of interesting that somebody considered students a demographic, but they are, and certainly underrepresented in this organization. And then some others, you know, it was mentioned underrepresented minorities, and then a couple specific mentions as well. And certainly we always need to work on those. And we had a number of additional comments. Again, I'll go over some of these on Friday, but this one in particular caught my attention because it has to do with the name we have, the North American Plant Phenotyping Network. I assume that name was picked because that's pretty much what all the other networks are called, is some sort of a plant phenotyping network, whether it's international or German or French or whatever. But this person mentioned that, that we need to be clear about the difference between phenotyping and phenomics, just like genotyping and genomics. And this person made the comment that phenotyping is more of a tool than a field. And do we want to be focused on that, or do we want to be focused more on the broader field? And I think this is an interesting question for us to ponder. And we certainly would like your input on it in terms of where our focus should be. Should it be trying to cover everything? Should it be specifically more focused or intentionally focused on the tools? And I think that's all I have. But like I said, that's just a teaser of some of the information we have collected, and a lot to think about and digest, which we'll be doing over the next few months, as well as getting this out for your consumption. So thank you. Thank you for participating in the survey.
So for those of you who your chair is beginning to get a little bit like, why am I still sitting here? What are you going to tell me next? We're almost to the end, so no fear. What I want to do next is first to thank April for having been our first chair. She's been a wonderful person to keep us together, make us show up, and give us a lot of guidance and ideas, and listen to all of us. I mean, have you tried to listen to the group of people? I mean, wow. She has put up with every last one of us.
Come on, man. Yeah, all right. I gotta do the whole thing here. Fantastic. Okay.
So I should point out that many of you also just participated in our elections. And our elections this year were weird. You were electing people for 2 years, not just one. The people we have elected for the upcoming board are the ones in green. So we're welcoming Frank from the Climate Corporation here toward the front, Andrew Leakey, and I know Andrew's gonna, oh, he's here. I haven't seen you yet. Andrew is also on the board for this year. In the coming year, having been the co-chair, I will be the chair. And when we start to get together and have conversations about who wants to do what, we will, among ourselves, figure out who's going to become the co-chair so that we can continue to teach people how this works and what his history was so that we don't have to, of course, remake the wheel as we move along. So we also elected for the year after that, this will seem odd, I'm sure, the next group. And that group includes Amy Tabb from USDA ARS, Jennifer Clark from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Taba Abedi, who is from Corteva. Why would we do that? That's weird, right? So the reason that we did that is because our board rotation works where you only have 2 years on the board. And if that's true, you show up and you need to be able to hit the ground running. And if we elect our board 2 years out, then the next year's group can start listening on our phone calls and get up to date, so the point at which they are a voting member of that board, they're not completely lost. You've probably yourself been a member of board, and for the first 6 months, you're just trying to learn the lingo. This year, we've done our elections so that we got both for that reason. Also, our board members who are rotating off the board are any of the phone calls for the following year, so that when we don't remember what happened last time, we still have them there to tell us, don't you remember, this is how we did it. So we're ramping up and we're ramping down from our board simultaneously so that the group of us that's having those conversations, we can learn and teach. So next year when we do an election, you'll only be electing for 2 years out, not 1 year and 2 year. So this was all put together in a very thoughtful way. So what we did was to lay out what our different categories of people on the board were, and to figure out initially for the first group how long their terms were going to be, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then create a rotation schedule so that we're always maintaining where we're adding to the board 3 or 4 people, and we're always maintaining the same balance of people that are industry versus non-industry, and we're always maintaining the same balance of disciplines. So this is something we've taken very seriously to make sure that we have this longitudinal vision and we have an idea of what's going to happen from there out. I mentioned earlier in this meeting, one of the things that we're very interested in is to get money, right? We have to be able to make this thing be sustainable. Well, in order to do that, we really do need to have some kind of legal standing. And so during this year when I am chair, the one thing that I will be working hard to do is to create a not-for-profit status for our organization so that we can take money not just through the universities that we work with, but we can actually work with industry and also look for our own grant funding. So that's something that we could do independently so that our organization doesn't get specifically tied to any other organization unnecessarily. So with that, we have a recap, and then you get to have a conversation and tell us what to do, because we've said certainly enough. So we went over what we've done in the last year, talked a little bit about what we want to do in the coming year. It was mentioned that we want volunteers to lead affinity groups. So on our website, we mention affinity groups, but no one has volunteered yet to lead them. Many of you have conversations all the time with people working in your area, that if you were open to people dialing in and joining those conversations, if you're working on sensors, maybe you have a group of 5 to 10 people that are already having these conversations. Create an affinity group. We'll help you organize it. If you're having conversations on how you're trying to measure something, you can imagine you're trying to figure out like some new measure for rates of photosynthesis from some kind of sensor that you use. Maybe you want to get a group together that's interested in photosynthesis. Create an affinity group. So that's one thing we would like to talk about in this next few minutes. We would also like to consider the differences between phenotyping and phenomics and discuss as a group how NAPPN needs to be working toward engagement in multiple different kinds of meetings. So with that, I guess I really want to turn it over to you guys for those topics, and not forget to thank the people that have given their time to make our organization run. So many of the items that you've gotten via email that are take this survey, do this election, let me help you, came largely from Darwin Campbell. Scott Zeracor is someone that has created and maintains our website. And Teresa Myers is the person that we've interacted with for the Phenome meeting to make sure that we can meet as a group here today.